What's more important for making a horror movie scary? Is it the tone, the vibe, the music, or is it the monster itself, the bad guy, the horror, the murderer? You could make an argument either direction, but if I was forced, I'd probably come down on the side of tone. The reason I ask is because Longlegs, the new $10 million budget serial killer horror movie starring Nicolas Cage and Maika Monroe, has been generating a lot of buzz for Cage's performance as the movie's serial killer. Apparently test audiences said Cage was so unsettling that he could potentially scare viewers off. I can only imagine they've toned Cage down after that initial feedback, because for my mind Longlegs is a far better film in terms of its creepy tone than it ever is for Cage's at times quite frankly cartoonish performance. More on that later. First, Longlegs, set in the mid-1990s, tells the story of rookie FBI agent Lee Harker, played by Maika Monroe, who, after correctly identifying the home of a murder suspect, is assigned to a 30-year-old Zodiac-style open serial killer case, in which somehow the mystery killer is talking fathers into murdering their families and then themselves. A bit of a whiz kid, Lee swiftly spots connections between the murdered families, how they were chosen and how they died, leading her and her boss to take another look at one of the crime scenes. There they find a clue, you'll have to bear with me, I'm being purposefully non-specific here, that puts them right on the heels of Longlegs, as the serial killer is named, played by Nicolas Cage. But with another murder threatened, can Lee find Longlegs and bring him to justice in time, and is she more closely connected to this serial killer than she realises? Okay, the good stuff first. As I said at the start of this review, the budget for Longlegs was only $10 million, half of which was spent on Nicolas Cage, so they had to be clever with the money that remained, fitting the form of the film to its budget. Because of this, Longlegs has a real indie vibe, a small production feeling, relying more on lo-fi music, mystery, empty buildings, the positioning of cameras rather than pyrotechnics to create tension. The audience is always looking at what's happening through something else, a doorway, a window, the reflection of a mirror. There's a soft focus to it all, a greyness that reminds me of something like True Detective or 70s and 80s horror movies, and it's perfect for the film's story. In fact, Longlegs isn't shy about wearing its influences on its sleeve generally. There's a hefty dollop of Silence of the Lambs here, more than just the obvious young female newly appointed FBI agent assigned to a serial killer case. There's a pinch of Fincher's Zodiac too, and more than a sprinkling of Kubrick's The Shining. Nowhere is this latter more obvious than in the sound design, which is of course vital in a creepy movie, especially a low budget one. There's a lot of silence in Longlegs and very little music, although what it is used, it's used fairly well. But the FX are fantastic. Low guttural roars, breathing in the ear, loud bangs at the door. There are plenty of jump scares, but they're not cheap, they're earned with the tension generated in the moments before. Technically, the film's good then, but how's the plot, how's the narrative? Well, weirdly, Longlegs is a film of two halves. The first, the Silence of the Lambs serial killer hunt, goes pretty much as you'd expect. It very much feels like that 90s movie, updated a bit for the internet era, 9/11 phone calls, gruesome murder scene pictures, Reddit stuff. But there's a twist a chunk of the way in, which is quite easy to see coming if you're paying attention. And it's once this twist has settled in that things in the story start to get a little more paranoid and go off the rails. There are a few scenes towards the end that almost had me laughing in a way that I don't think was the intention of the filmmakers, and a Hercule Poirot explanation of what happened that felt really out of place. Still, the film's story has an almost Grimm's fairy tale-like simplicity to it that I like, if you can ignore the silliness. Speaking of silly, that's where we come to the actors' performances. I say performances, Maika Monroe is actually perfectly serviceable as Lee Harker. Her character is supposed to be lacking in empathy, a psychopath herself perhaps, so Maika doesn't have a huge amount to do acting wise. It's all quite one note, but she gets the job done well enough. Nicolas Cage's turn as Longlegs, on the other hand, it wasn't really for me. He's buried under so much makeup that you'd struggle to tell it was him at times were it not for that oh so recognisable voice. But there's definitely something a bit Heath Ledger as the Joker about the whole thing. His looks, his acting. This isn't helped by a few scenes in the film being eerily similar to ones in The Dark Knight. I've heard a few people call Cage's performance stand out. Cage himself, modest as ever, considered it so good he presumed he'd have people queuing up for him to play serial killers in the future. Not gonna happen, I don't like violence, he said, or something like that. But I have to say that the minute he appears on the screen, all of the tension leaked out of Longlegs for me. He's almost cartoonish at times, a little over the top. I know it's hard to come up with something new in the serial killer genre, but what Cage did here wasn't for me. So overall, a mixed bag then. There was a lot to like here, definitely. I wasn't really bored at any point, helped by the movie's economical 1 hour 40 minutes-ish runtime. Longlegs creates great tension, which, let's be honest, is the number one job of a horror film. It looks good, has clever cinematography, uses light well to manipulate the viewer, but that central performance, the Hannibal Lecter, the Norman Bates, the John Doe, just isn't there. Good try though, definitely intrigued to see what director Oz Perkins comes up with next. Anyway, nothing more to say, this is Movie Maverick signing out.